Shalom on the Sabbath day. Welcome back to the Philadelphia Assemblies, or welcome if this is your first time joining us. This video is not live on YouTube, but it's going to premiere at 9:45 on Sabbath, which is tomorrow, actually. We had a little technical trouble yesterday. So the title of today's message is The Rapture or Not. And we're going to cover that question, rapture or not. Okay? Let's just go. We already prayed, had an opening prayer before we started. We're going to try to get right to the point on these videos so people don't lose their attention. Okay? Rapture or not. Now, there's a lot of people out there now that are predicting a pre-tribulation rapture. Matter of fact, it's been at least a dozen times in the last 28 years that I can remember where certain teachers or so-called prophets have projected the coming of a rapture, okay? And so far, obviously, there hasn't been one. Our question today, is there going to be one at all, okay? Pre-trib. Obviously, there will be a time when we're going to meet our Messiah in the air. There's scripture to support that. But when is that? Is it before the tribulation, mid-tribulation, or post-tribulation? Okay? So we're going to go ahead and kick this off in Matthew 24, verse 3. I'm going to read just one verse, and then we're going to skip down. So we're going to read verse 3, and then we're going to skip to 21 and 22. Okay, we're going to get a witness here, and we're going to get 3 witnesses, because on the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses may a thing be found to be true. So verse 3 of chapter 24 of the Gospel of Matthew, or the Bezor, it says, "And he, the Messiah, sat upon the Mount of Olives, and the taught ones came unto him privately," okay, saying, "Tell us, when shall these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the world?" It says here in Matthew in the English translation. So 2 questions that was asked. The first one was at the Messiah's coming, and the last one is talking about the end of the age, which would be after the 1,000 years, and projecting the Father's coming, or Yahuwah's coming. So let's go ahead and explore those 2 questions. Okay, let's drop to, we're going to get a statement here, and we're going to read just, again, Matthew 24. We're going to move over to verse 21 and 22. Okay, Messiah speaking here. Okay, if you have a English Bible, you know, these words should be in red because it's our Messiah speaking. It says, "For then will be great tribulation," okay, or affliction, or distress, okay, "such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, nor ever will be." Okay? If our parents and grandparents would hear us saying that this is worse now than it was, say, back in World War II or World War I, they'd probably have our hides, okay? Because I'll assure you it's not even close to what it was during the Depression era in the United States. So right there, we could see that we're not in the great tribulation. We may be in a tribulation, okay? But in verse 8, our Messiah says, and I'm just going to add this, "And these are the beginning of sorrows," because he'd already say there'd be wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes, storms in various places. But that's been going on since the beginning of creation, okay? This is what they call the beginning of birthing pains, and that birth that this is all talking about is the final new heaven and new earth. But before that, our Messiah has to return. And then he said, this great tribulation before our Messiah returns, we're going to read it here. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. Now, that's end of a thought. And then it says, for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Okay? Now, if there's a pre-tribulation rapture, and we're going to get raptured out of here before the Messiah returns, why would the times have to be shortened from 7 years, as we can read in the book of Daniel, okay, to 3.5 years? Okay? Why would the time need to be shortened? Okay? That's a good question, I would assume. Now, we're going to come back to Matthew 24 and read 29 through 31, but we're going to go to Mark, the Gospel or Bezor of Mark, for another witness on what we're talking about here, and also a lead into the next scripture. So Mark chapter 13, and we're going to pick it up in verse 19, and we're going to read through 17. Okay, verse 19 through 17. And again, this Mark is another one of the taught ones, okay? And he's another witness to this, okay? But he wasn't an eyewitness like Matthew was, okay? Let's read verse 19 again in red. For in those days shall be affliction or tribulation, as we read back in Matthew 24. And notice what it says, such as was not from the beginning of the creation. So the world back there is talking about the creation, okay? Back to when everything that was created, okay? And then it says, and except that Yahuah had shortened those days, no flesh should be saved, but for the elect's sake, whom he hath chosen, he has shortened the days. Again, agreeing back to what we read in Matthew 24, that the elect are going to be here, or else the days wouldn't need to be shortened to save the elect. Okay? Then it says in verse 22, for false messiahs, okay, are chosen ones, and false prophets will rise. Now, back in Deuteronomy, we know that it tells us that if you're a prophet, the evidence that you're a false prophet, you say things that are going to happen and they don't happen. In other words, you invent them out of your own mind or your own heart. So there's going to be in the last days, and we're in the last days, just not yet the tribulation, okay? These false chosen ones and false prophets shall rise and will show signs and wonders to seduce or to lead astray, if it were possible, even the elect. And right now we see the beginnings of those signs and wonders, but the tribulation hasn't yet come, according even to what we're reading here. So we got AI now, we got holograms. You can only imagine how these things can increase over time. We just don't know how much time, okay? So, verse 23, but listen or take heed, behold, I told you these things. I'm going to ad-lib before they happened, okay? Then in verse 24, see, this chapter here in 13 and also in Matthew 24, also Luke 21, are chronological in order. Chronological means they're putting these sequences in order so that we'll know when the time of the end is near and when it has arrived. Okay? So he says, pay attention. Behold, I've told you before all things, but in those days, listen, after the tribulation, here's the sign, but when does it start? After the tribulation, okay? The sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light. And we know that we can see that in Joel chapter 2, okay? We're going to also look at it where Isaiah prophesies that as well. We're not going to go look at it, but we're going to mention it. But then he says in verse 26, and then will you see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. And we can read about that back in Daniel chapter 7, verse 13. Okay, we're not going to go there today for time's sake, but this is all prophecy that he's talking about. Notice what he says, after the tribulation. Okay, and then shall you see these signs and wonders, and then you'll see the Messiah, coming in all his glory after these signs and wonders. All those things are in order. We're going to see 3 witnesses. And then it says in verse 27, we're going to then jump back to Matthew, and then will he send his messengers. Okay? This could be referring to angelic beings, and it also could be human beings with a message. Okay? And what are they going to do? They're going to gather together his elect from the 4 winds, from the uttermost parts of the earth to the outermost parts of the heavens. When is this? After the Messiah returns. That's when he's going to send his messengers, and because we're going to see the Messiah coming in all his glory, and then he will send his messengers and shall gather together his elect from the 4 corners of the 4 winds and of the earth, and also the corners of the sky. Okay, Shamayim. So let's go back to Matthew 24 now. Matthew 24, and we're going to pick it up. We're going to read a little more in Matthew before we jump to Luke for our 3rd witness. Matthew 24, and we're going to start in 29, and we're going to just read through 31. And he's going to, again, confirm what we read in Luke. That's why we're reading this in this order. Okay? So immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon will not give her light, and the stars will fall from the Shamayim, or the heavens, and the powers of the Shamayim will be shaken. And again, you can read about that in Isaiah 13, verse 10, and Joel chapter 2, verse 10. Okay, that very sign, and again, that's another witness. And notice it says, and then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in the Shamayim, and then will all the tribes of the earth mourn. Okay? All the different families and tribes are going to mourn, and they shall or will see the Son of Man, or the son of Adam, the son of Adam, coming in the clouds of the Shamayim with power and great glory. Okay? Timing. Okay? It's immediately after the tribulation. They'll see the signs in the heavens, and then they will see and appear the sign of the Son of Man in the Shamayim, and all the tribes will mourn. Verse 31, last verse. And he will send his messengers with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the 4 winds, from one end of the Shamayim and to the other. Timing is everything, guys. And there's not going to be a pre-trib rapture if he's not going to gather his elect until after he returns. Okay? That's confusion. And I know they got ways of explaining it, but I just don't agree with Scripture overall supporting any type of pre-trib, mid-trib, only post-trib. And that's when we're going to be risen and we're going to meet the Messiah in the air. Okay? Let's go to Luke chapter 21. Luke, for our 3rd witness of the actual taught ones. Luke, again, wasn't an eyewitness, but Luke would also help write the book of Acts and the book of Hebrews. Okay? So he's a pretty reliable witness. He gathered his information from the other taught ones. So Luke chapter 21. There we go. Luke 21 and verse 22, and we're going to read through 28. Okay, 21 through 28. Again, Messiah speaking here. Then let them which are in Judea, or Yehudah, flee to the mountains. This is we're backing up, on the timing here. So let them flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let not them that are in the country, or out in the country, enter thereinto. For these be the days of vengeance, or punishment, or revenging, or tribulation. In other words, Luke talking about the same time period. And then he says, with that all things which are written may be fulfilled. Everything in prophecy's got to be fulfilled as it's recorded. But woe unto them that are with child. And he's talking about during this great tribulation, and to them that give suck, or are nursing children, because it's going to be bad in those days. For there shall be great distress or tribulation in the land, and wrath or anger upon this people. This people, And really, it's all people. But it happened back in 70 AD when the temple was raked. These things are dual or secular in nature, Verse 24. And they will fall by the edge of the sword. Talking about the sons, the physical seed of Israel. They'll fall by the sword for their disobedience. But there's also going to be a time when everyone falls by the sword that rebels, and will be led away captive into all nations. The nation, the physical seed of Israel, is still scattered among the nations. They have not yet been gathered, but his elect covers a lot more than just the physical seed. His elect is also those that are grafted in Romans chapter 11, and become the commonwealth of Israel. And we'll read that right here. And Jerusalem will be trodden down. Now we know it was trodden down in 70 AD by the Goths of the Gentiles, which they were the Gentiles. They were Anglo-Saxons, So when this particular verse is speaking of the white people being in control, the Anglo-Saxons, So he says, Jerusalem shall be trodden down by the nations, or by the Gentiles, until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled or finished. Let me tell you, the days of the Gentiles have not been fulfilled. According to Romans chapter 11, until the fullness of the nations, or the Gentiles, are grafted in, this time of the Gentiles is not going to be fulfilled, but there's going to be a lot of distress on the physical seed during this time period because of their rebellion against Yahuwah. So verse 25, and there will be signs, same as we've read in Mark and in Matthew, signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, and upon the earth distresses of nations, not just one, but many, with perplexity, and the sea and the waves roaring. So it's speaking of this time of great tribulation, such as there never was before, never was before. What happened in Jerusalem 70 AD was a type pointing towards the great tribulations. Verse 26, men's heart failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming upon the earth. Because all these things are going to become on the earth. For the powers of the Shamanayim will be shaken. Again, Isaiah 13:10 and Joel 2:10 is where you see this signs that are talking about. Notice the order, consistent in all these witnesses. And then it says, and when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draws near. Redemption draws near. What's he talking about? He's talking about the first resurrection is drawing near, where his elect will be gathered from the one end of the earth to the other, and from the four corners of the earth to the other. And now we're going to go to 1 Corinthians 15. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. And for all you that don't think Paul is a false prophet, you could fast forward the video if you want past this, but it's not going to change the witnesses we just read. It's just another witness that agrees with these things. Okay, Shaul. And we're going to talk about, there's going to be a lot of false teachings put to rest in this chapter. And we can't read it enough. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, we're going to read 11 through 28 to start with. Okay? And let's just, in 11 he says, therefore, whether it be I or they, so we preach and so we believe. I, Paul, or Shaul, and they, Peter, or Cephar, and all the other ones that are in Jerusalem. That's what he's talking about. He says, therefore, whether it be I or they, so we preach, and so you believe by our teachings. Okay? Now, if the Messiah be preached that he rose from the dead. Now, let's make no mistake about this. If he didn't rise from the dead, we also know Yahuah can't die. Okay? So that's going to be an issue for those that believe he is Yahuah in the flesh. Okay? They deal with it whatever way they need to. But he says that he, the Messiah, rose from the dead. How say some among you that there is no resurrection of the dead? The some he's talking about is the Sadducees. Okay, the Pharisees believed in the resurrection. The Sadducees did not. Okay, and Yahusha contended with the Sadducees over this very issue, and Paul's doing the same thing with the nations. That verse 13, but if there be no resurrection of the dead, then Messiah is not risen, and he's still dead, and he's in the grave. That's obvious he is a man. We're going to cover that more too. Verse 14, and if the Messiah is not risen, then is our preaching worthless, and your faith is worthless also. Yes, and we are found false witnesses of Elohim. Okay, the word G-O-D here in the English Bible is equal to theoe, and if you looked at theoe is a plural noun, and it's equal to Elohim in the Hebrew. And it says, because we have testified of Elohim, we've said that he told us that he raised up the Messiah when he didn't raise him up. And then you're false teachers. And that's what Matthew, Mark, and Luke warned you of, as these false teachers that were to come. And then he says, he raised up Messiah whom he did not raise up, if so be that the dead don't rise. The Messiah is our example, our guarantee that we too will be risen at either the first or the second resurrection. Hopefully the first, if we're part of that elect, okay, that's gathered from the four corners of the earth. Verse 16. Did I read that? For if the dead rise not, then is not Messiah raised, or he's not raised up. Verse 17, and if Messiah be not raised, your faith is worthless, and you are yet in your sins. Because see, he had to die and spit that blood as that perfect Lamb of Elohim, and then that resurrection was our surety, so that we too could receive resurrection from the dead. Verse 18, then they also which are fallen asleep. Now, if you've got an English Bible, most of them say dead over here. So they're not talking about taking a nap. In the Messiah are perished, because if he didn't raise from the dead, then they're not going to. Okay? Verse 19, if in this life only, while we're yet in the flesh, we have hope in the Messiah, we are all men most miserable. But now in the Messiah, as we're putting him on, we're becoming like him, but now is Messiah risen from the dead and become what? The first fruits of them that slept or died. So he's the first one that was risen from the dead. Well, some people say, well, I don't know if I agree. Paul's a false prophet, because we know that Messiah raised up Lazarus. I'm sorry, I had one of them moments there when I couldn't bring his name. And he'd been in the grave 4 days. But I assure you, Lazarus died and is in the grave until this day, okay? There's others, too, in the Tanakh or Old Testament that was risen from the dead, but they didn't live eternally, okay? So this is important that the Messiah became the first fruits of them that died. Verse 21, another key verse. For since by man, this again is Greek 444, and if you go look it up in a concordance or a Bible dictionary, you're going to find out that means human being, okay? So listen, for since by man or human being came death, by human being, same word, 444, came also the resurrection of the dead. So either Paul doesn't know what he's talking about, or Messiah was a man just like Adam, because in verse 22 it's going to tell you exactly what he was talking about. For as in Adam, or Adam, the first man, all die. Even so in the Messiah shall all be made alive. And again, here's another key word. The word all is Greek 3956, plantos, okay? It means all included, everybody. So this is saying all the way back to Adam, all the way up to the final person that was living, all are going to be made alive. There's going to be either in the first resurrection, we're going to read that in Revelation or Hazon chapter 20, that the rest of the dead be made alive. Okay? So, for as in Adam, or Adam, all die, even so through Messiah shall all be made alive. Meditate on that. Okay? Then it says in verse 23, Paul says, but every man what? In his own order. See how important order is in prophecy? Verse 23, but every man in his own order, Christ or the Messiah, the first fruits. Afterwards, they that are Messiahs at his coming. Now, that's not just talking about the physical seed, is it? That's talking about his elect, which includes all the nations that were grafted in during the time of the Gentiles. Verse 24, then comes the end. What's he talking about here? This is talking about when the earth is burned up in a fervent heat. That's the end. When he, the Messiah, will have delivered up the kingdom to the mighty one, Theo in Greek, okay, which means the same as like El, okay, the mighty one. Even the Father. So it's even affirming that he's talking about the Messiah is delivering his kingdom up to the Father, Yahuwah. Okay, when he shall put down all rule, talking about he, Yahuwah, shall have put down all rule and all authority and all power. Okay? Ultimately, everything that happens, Yahuwah makes to happen. Okay? Verse 25, for he, the Messiah, must reign till he, Yahuwah, have put all enemies under Messiah's feet. Okay? Verse 26, and that you can go back to Psalm 110, verse 1, and you'll see that. Verse 26, the last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. When is that? That's after the 1,000 years, okay, when the Father comes down and all things have been put under Messiah's feet. For he, Yahuwah, hath put all things under his, Messiah's feet at that time. But when he, Yahuwah, saith all things are put under the Messiah, it is made known that he is accepted. Talking about Yahuwah is accepted, which did put all things under the Messiah. Okay? Verse 28, and when all things shall be subdued unto him, then will the Son also himself, talking about Yahusha, being subject to him, Yahuwah, that put all things under him. All makes sense, doesn't it? When you know who he and him is. Okay? That Yahuwah, this word is the theos in Greek, equal to the tetragrammaton, that Yahuwah may be what? All and in all. Awesome, isn't it? Verse 29. Oh, we're not going to read 29. It's not that important in the context of our conversation. For time's sake, we're going to skip to 39. 1 Corinthians chapter 39. Paul's going to break down the different things that we need to see in prophecy and understand. Verse 39, all flesh is not the same flesh, okay, or meat, okay, flesh of, he's going to let you know, but there is one kind of flesh that men, we got one kind of flesh, and another flesh of beasts, that's talking about, all four-legged animals and things like that, and another of fishes, all meat or flesh, but it's not the same. Another of birds. There are also, and this is very important, celestial bodies and bodies terrestrial. Now, the celestial bodies are considered heavenly bodies like stars, okay, like our sun, okay? And terrestrial bodies are earthy, okay? So they got no light, they got no fire, they're earthy. This is an example that Paul's setting up. And he says, but the glory of the celestial is one, like the sun, it has the light, okay, and it's the glory. And the glory of the terrestrial is, I say, of another, because if we didn't have the sun, we'd never see the moon. Does that make sense? Okay. Verse 41, there is one glory of the sun and another glory of the moon. Comes directly from the sun. And just like the Father is the light, okay, that is reflected off our Messiah. And if we have the Ruach, it's reflected off of us. And another glory of the stars, for one star differs from another star in glory, okay, or light, or in Yahuwah's case, honor, okay, and the Messiah's honor is another. Verse 42, now he's going to give you this analogy. So also is the resurrection of the dead. It is sown in corruption. That means when we die, our corruptible body goes into the grave and it corrupts, okay? It is also raised. It is raised in incorruption. What's that mean? When you get raised at whichever resurrection you're raised at, you're going to be raised spirit. It's not going to be first, it's going to be raised in the flesh like the Messiah was. We're going to be raised in spirit, okay? Verse 43. It is sown in dishonor, because there was no dishonor with Messiah. It is raised in honor. It is sown in weakness, the weakness of the flesh. It is raised in power, because you've been changed. You received that spiritual body like the Messiah now has and sits at the right hand of Yahuwah. Okay, so verse 44, it is sown a natural body. When we're put in the grave, we're put in the grave as a natural body. And then he said, as it is raised a spiritual body, or as a ruach, okay? This is a natural, there is a natural body. Everyone's had one that's lived here on the earth, Messiah and everything. Listen to what this says. And there is a spiritual body. And so it is written, the first man, Adam, okay, and that's what his name means, was made a living being, okay, not a spirit. He was made a living being. He was flesh, okay, he was made from the dirt. The last Adam was made a life-giving ruach, or spirit. Now, the second Adam, or Messiah, is the last Adam, and notice it says was made. Now that's added, but that's a good add, okay? Because he was a fleshly body to begin with, and then later he received a spiritual body when he raised from the dead and ascended to the Father. Okay? However, that which was first, which is spirit, however, that was not first, which is spiritual. It wasn't first with the Messiah. He was first flesh and blood man, and then spiritual. And us either. But that which is natural. And afterward, that which is spiritual. 47, the first man is of the earth. Okay, he's still in the ground, still there to this day. He's dirt, but he's still there, earthy. And the second man, when he's raised again, is of Yahuwah from the Shamayim. Verse 48, as the earthy such are they also that are earthy. So everyone that's in the grave up to this point is still earth. Okay? And as the heavenly, such are they also that are heavenly. Now, we know no one's been raised from the dead except the Messiah, because he's the first fruits of them that slept. Okay? Then he said in verse 49, he goes on even deeper and he said, as we have all, I added all, borne or carried the image of the earthy, we shall also bear the image of the heavenly. Every one of us, at one point when we're in that resurrection, because we're going to be resurrected in power, even if we're going in the fire, because we got to stand before Yahuah, and you can't do that in the flesh. The kingdom of heaven cannot be, or the Shamayim, cannot be received by flesh and blood. Verse 50. Now this I say, brethren, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of Elohim. Neither does corruption, a fleshly body, inherit incorruption. Okay? In other words, you can't get a spiritual body without dying and being corrupted in the grave. See, Messiah was in the grave 3 days and 3 nights, but he didn't see corruption. We all see corruption. That's the difference. Okay? Verse 51, behold, I show you a mystery. Okay? Or a hidden truth. We will not all sleep. A lot of people think that when Messiah returns, that there's still, there'll be people that'll be risen then that are on earth. That's not what this is saying. Behold, I show you a mystery, a hidden truth. We shall not all sleep. This is talking about during the millennial reign, when the Father comes back, all will have not slept. Some of them will be changed. We'll read it. But we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump. Okay? The last trump this is talking about the Day of Atonement, or Yom Kippur, after the 1,000 years, when the day for the great white throne judgment, the rest of the dead will be raised. And that Day of Atonement, they always blow up the trumpet or the shofar. Look it up, don't trust me. For the trumpet will sound, and that's the last one, and the dead will be raised, what? Incorruptible. They're not going to be raised in the flesh like Messiah when he said, do not touch me. I have not yet ascended to the Father. And we shall be changed. That's when that change is going to happen, is when you're raised incorruptible. For this corruptible that we live in now must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality. We must, in order to stand before the Most High. Verse 54. So when this corruptible will have put on incorruption, whether it's at the first or the second resurrection, and this mortal shall have put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, death is swallowed up into victory. So remember we read earlier, Paul just said, the last thing that will be put to death, well, it can't be before the new heaven and new earth. The last thing that's put down before the new heaven and new earth is death. There'll be people living and dying during the millennial reign, during that 1,000 years. And you can go back and read Isaiah 25 and verse 8 specifically, and it'll give you more on that. Verse 55, O death, where is your sting? Hosea 13, verse 14, where is your victory? Verse 56, the sting of death is sin, because the penalty for sin is death, okay? And the strength of sin is in the Torah, okay? For the transgression of Torah is sin, okay? 1 John chapter 3, verse 4, okay? But thanks be to the Mighty One, Theo, which gives us the victory through our Mighty One, Yahusha, the Messiah. Verse 58, therefore, my beloved brethren, be you steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Mighty One. Okay, it says the Lord here, it's the Curio. Okay, not the Curios, but the Curio. And that's equal to that word Theo that we were talking about. Therefore, For as much as you know that your labor is not in vain in the Kyrio, the mighty one. Okay? Let's go now back to Matthew. We're going to see another witness of what we're talking about, the pre-trib rapture and all this about the resurrection that we're covering. Matthew 13. Matthew chapter 13. Hope you guys are all prepared for this winter storm that's coming. It'll probably be going when the video's out. Okay? Matthew 13, because the temperature's dropping in here as we speak, even with our heat on. Okay? So here we are, Matthew 13, and we're going to pick it up in verse 24. This parable is very important to get, and it's clear, it agrees with everything we've already read. And Messiah in Matthew 13 is going through these different parables. This parable applies. He says, another parable put he forth, the Messiah, unto them, the taught ones, saying, the kingdom of the Shamayim is like to a man which sowed good seed in his field. We're talking about the Father. He's the one that sowed good seed in the field. But while men slept, okay, men were already dead and they're sleeping, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat. The wheat is the good seed, and tares are weeds, and went his way. Okay? But when the blade was sprung up, when the very first part of the plant came up and brought forth fruit, that means the first fruit of the plant was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared also the tares along with him. You ever see a tare? Okay, when they bring forth their fruit, they look a lot like wheat, but their tare will never straighten up. When wheat is ready to be harvested for Shavuot, okay, I just said it the other way. I said it backwards. Let me back up so I don't make a misstatement. Okay, the wheat, when it gets ready, it bows its head, okay? And the tare will never bow its head to the Most High. That's why the wheat and the tare is the example. So when wheat gets ripe, it gets heavy and it bows, okay? But a tare will never bow. That's how they knew it was wheat or a tare. Verse 27. So the servants of the householder came and said unto him, okay, that'd be those that serve the Most High. Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where did the tares come from? Okay, why are they amongst the seed? He, the Father, said unto them, an enemy hath done this. Obviously the enemy being the adversary, ha-Satan. The servant said unto him, will you then that we go and gather them up? So they're asking, should we go out and get them now before the harvest? Okay? No. He's going to tell you why. Because they look so similar. But he said, no, lest while you gather up the tares, you root up also the wheat with them. Okay? Let both grow until the harvest. Okay? This is talking about the great white throne judgment. Everybody's growing together until the harvest. And in the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, gather you together first the tares. Okay? So if we're talking about that, you want to be taken first when Messiah returns. Okay? Before the tribulation and before all that, I want to be left behind. Okay? And bind them in bundles to burn them. Because this is the white throne judgment. They're getting ready to be gathered up into bundles. But gather the wheat into my barn. The barn represents the new heaven and new earth, the Shamayim. And that's where you want to be gathered. You don't want to go up in some pre-tribulation rapture. That doesn't agree with Scripture. But rather the wheat into my barn. Okay? And I believe that's where we're going to stop reading. 30. Yes. Okay, now let's go to Revelation 20 and we'll get our last pictures of all this. You'll see what all these guys are talking about. You know, we looked at Mark, we looked at Luke, and we looked at Matthew. And then we looked at Shaul. He didn't say anything any different. Matter of fact, he was the clearer of all of them. Remember, he was a Pharisee of Pharisees, taught by the great Gamaliel. Okay? Revelation or Hazon, chapter 20. If your understanding doesn't line up with Revelation 20, you need to do some more studying, because this here is also chronological, just like the taught ones that we were just reading, and also Shaul. Verse 1. And I saw an angel come down from the Shamayim, having the key of the bottomless pit, and a great chain in his hand. Okay? So we know this is, he said, and I saw an angel come down from the Shamayim, having the key of the bottomless pit, and a great chain in his hand. When is this? This is before the millennial reign. Okay? Because this is before the millennial reign, because during that millennial reign, Messiah is going to be teaching, and also his elect is going to be the priesthood after the order of Melchizedek, and Satan's not going to be, or Ha-Satan is not going to be able to corrupt them, okay, like he's been allowed to corrupt them. And he laid hold on that dragon, referring to Ha-Satan, the old Satan, the old serpent, which is the devil and Ha-Satan, and bind him how long? 1,000 years. Read Isaiah 27. And verse 1 is the most specific. And then in verse 3 it says, and cast him into the bottomless pit. That's where Satan will be during the abyss, Tartarus in Greek, the place of darkness, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that he must be released for a little season. Why is that? Because he's going to go out and deceive the nations, just like we all got the opportunity to be deceived by Ha-Satan. After they get taught the truth during that millennial reign, they're going to get tested by Satan, and a bunch are going to choose Satan. Okay? Let's go. Verse 4. And I saw thrones, and they sat upon them. Okay? Thrones, plural. Okay? And talking about the Most High, and judgment was given unto them. Okay, talking about the Messiah and the Most High. I saw the beings of them. This is also what Yochanan the Revelator saw. He said, I saw the beings of them that were beheaded for the witness of Yahusha and for the word of Elohim. Okay? And it's two different things. We know the word of Elohim is talking about the Ruach, but also can talk about the written word. Okay? And which had not worshipped the beast. So worshiping the beast is going to be a choice. And neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with the Messiah for 1,000 years. That's the priesthood after order of Melchizedek, as the book of Abrams or Hebrews teaches. But the rest of the dead, notice this, lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. Okay, till the great white throne judgment. We're going to read that. Okay, this is the first resurrection he just covered. Okay, and he's going to explain that the blessed or Baruch and set apart is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death have no power. Okay. So if you're in the first resurrection, you don't have to worry about the lake of fire, okay? Because there's nothing going to have any power of you over that second death. Again, that's not obviously living forever in hell or Gehenna being the fire with Ha-Satan and his pitchfork, okay? But they will be what? Priests after the order of Elohim, and of the Messiah, and will reign with him 1,000 years. Now, if Messiah is down here on earth and we're reigning with him, then obviously we got to be on earth and not in heaven like the Adventists teach. Okay? Verse 7, and when the 1,000 years are finished, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison. Why? Because he's going to test those. Verse 8, and will go out to deceive the nations which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, okay, which is thought to be in Russia, Can be translated Armageddon if you check it out. To gather them together to battle, the number of whom is the sand of the sea. That's how many it's going to be. It says, and shall go out, ha-Satan, shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth. In other words, all over the earth. And he's saying Gog and Magog, thought to be in Russia, Armageddon, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sound of the sea. Okay? Usually the one that's pictured as sound of without number, or the sand of the sea, is talking about against Israel. Verse 9. And you can read that in Ezekiel 38:2. Okay, about the battle here. Verse 8. And they went up on the breadth, or on the width of the earth, and surrounded the camp of the believers about, and the beloved city, which is going to tell you is Jerusalem. Okay? And fire came down from Elohim. Okay, we know that Yahuah is an all-consuming fire out of the Shamayim, and did what? Devoured them. Didn't say tortured them forever and ever, did it? It said it devoured them. Verse 10, and ha-Satan, that deceived them, was cast into the lake of fire, Gehenna, okay, and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are. And they shall be tormented night and day, and this says forever and ever in an English Bible. Go check it out. It says from this age to age, or from this age to the next, till they're burnt up, till they're devoured, till they're destroyed. Verse 11, and I saw a great white throne, okay, coming out, a great white throne, and him that sat on it, this throne, remember it earlier said on thrones, but this throne, from whose face the earth and the Shamayim fled away, burned up in a fervent heat, okay, and there was found no place for them. Wasn't no place for them to run. They couldn't get away from Yahuah. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before Elohim. Okay? And the books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life. See, we read all through Scripture about this book of life, or the Lamb's book of life. Okay? And the other book that they're talking about here is the Torah, because they're going to be judged according to the Torah, because we're going to be judged according to Messiah and how he lived his life. He was the walking, talking Torah. So it says, I saw the dead, small and great, stand before Elohim, and the books, plural, were open. And then it says, and another book was opened, which is the book of life, Lamb's book of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books, plural, according to their deeds or work. Daniel 7, verse 10. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and Sheol, which is grave, okay, delivered up the dead. This is the rest of the dead after 1,000 years that all they're going to be raised in incorruption to stand before Yahuah, which were in them, and they were judged every man according to his deeds, work, okay, whether or not he obeyed the spirit of the Torah, okay. And death and the grave, Sheol, okay, Hades in Greek, Sheol in Hebrew, were cast into the lake of fire. What did he say? He didn't say this is eternal burning up in hell with Satan and a pitchfork. This is the second death. And whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire and devoured, burned up, destroyed. 21 now, we're going to read right into 21 down through verse 8, and that'll finish us. And I saw a new Shamayim, or new heavens, and a new earth. For the first Shamayim and the first earth was passed away, burned up. Read Isaiah 66:22. And there was no more sea. Remember in the beginning, they didn't have seas. They formed them a little bit later. At first, the water was in one place. Verse 2. And I, Yochanan, saw the set-apart city, New Jerusalem. Remember, the one here on earth was just a type of the one that was really in the Shamayim. All the way back in Exodus, he told Moshe to build one like the one in the Shamayim, and he did it by the T, and we had a temple a lot of the time, not all the time, and it was in Jerusalem. Coming down from Elohim out of the Shamayim. So the real Jerusalem that's in the heavens, where the Messiah and Yahuwah and the set-apart messengers are, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. Okay? That, a lot of people say they think that's the bride, but well, that's a type of the bride, but I could show you in Paul's writings where it says we are the bride too. But again, if you think Paul's a false prophet, that's another story. Verse 3, and I heard a great voice out of the Shamayim saying, obviously this great voice is the Ruach speaking for Yahuwah, behold, the tabernacle of Elohim is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and Yahuwah himself will be with them and be their mighty one. Okay? So this word is the theos, equal to the tetragrammatron, his name being Yahuwah. Verse 4, and Yahuwah shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. See, because Yahuwah's not been present with man until now. And because no man had heard his voice or seen his face. And there will be no more death, neither shall there be crying, neither shall there be any more pain. Okay? There will be during the millennium. For the former things have been done away or passed away. Isaiah 25 verse 8. And he that sat upon the throne, Yahuwah was the one sitting on that throne, singular, because remember there was thrones in 20. Behold, I make all things new. He made a new heaven and a new earth. And he said unto them, write, for these words are true and faithful. Go back to Isaiah 49:19, similar words. And verse 6, and he said unto me, okay, he being Yahuwah said through the Ruach to Yochanan in a vision, it is done. I am Alpha and Omega. And then he gives you the definition, the beginning and the end. I will give unto him that is athirst for the fountain of water of life freely. Talking about the Ruach. Everybody, remember we just read that earlier too, will all have that inpouring of the Spirit. Verse 7, he that overcomes shall inherit all things. Overcomes what? The flesh. By modeling the Messiah and keeping the Torah, because we want to be pleasing in Yahuwah's sight. And I will be his mighty one. Yahuwah will be his mighty one. And he shall be my son, little s, because this is talking about us, okay? Messiah is his son, but us too. Verse 8, last verse. But the fearful and the unbelieving and the abominable and the murderers and the whoremongers and the sorcerers and the idolaters and all liars will have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, again, which is the second death. Hopefully somebody could see through this that there's definitely no pre-trib rapture. He's not going to gather his elect until the Messiah returns, okay? So if you haven't yet subscribed to the Philadelphia assemblies, we ask that you would do that. We're shooting for 1,000 subscribers, and hopefully you've noticed the difference in the definition of the video because we're recording in 4K now, okay? And we're trying to improve the quality of our videos. I'm trying to learn how to edit video, okay? So that I can add even the scriptures on the videos, but give me time, I'm slow on technology. So again, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up on YouTube. It helps us on the algorithm, okay? Share it to your social media page, whatever one you like, whether it be Facebook or Instagram or wherever. And then don't forget to hit that notification bell so you get notified when our next video comes out. This should, again, premiere right around 9:45 a.m. on Shabbat. May Yahuwah bless until we meet again.